Hello everyone, my name is Ankit Jain. I welcome you all to my channel, Tech Journey with Ankit. From today, we will be starting another playlist, again with respect to the integration on my channel, Tech Journey with Ankit. This playlist will be dedicated to understand how you can use the bulk API. There are lots of things that we will do in this playlist. We will try to understand what is bulk API, in what scenarios you should actually go and use the bulk API, how the bulk API is different than the other APIs that Salesforce do offer, like the REST API. We also try to understand what is the difference between the bulk API 1.0 and the 2.0. And we will also touch base few real-time use case scenario as well in this playlist. I hope, like the other playlist related to the integration that you folks have already loved on my channel, you also like this particular playlist as well. Do share your thoughts definitely in the comment section if you are looking for the bulk API understanding. In case you folks like to have one-to-one connect with me, you guys can connect with me on the top mat. If you scan this QR code or click on the link available in the video description, you will be landed up on this page where there will be two options available. Option number one is to have one-to-one connect with me. Moreover, you can also download few of the digital products that I am offering, which is again very good based on the feedback that I have received from you folks, like the data cloud guide, admin guide, interview prep guide, as well as the LWC notes. With the interview prep guide and the LWC notes, you will also get the code base that I have developed with respect to the playlist that are again already available on the channel. This interview prep guide, again, it will help you to speed up your preparation for the interview, which almost have more than 350 plus questions based on the different topics like the admin, Apex, LWC, integration, flows, and whatnot. Moreover, it also have the few scenario-based questions on the LWC as well as on the admins, Apex, and the flows too. Now, that being said, you guys can also go and connect with me on the Telegram, where the like-minded people do discuss their Salesforce queries on the group as well. Now, before we even go and deep dive into the what is actually the bulk API, let's try to understand this. The common challenge that we always have whenever we are working with the Salesforce, and that is the large data volume. We know that in Salesforce, whenever we are trying to dealing with the large data volume, we always come with the governor limit. Those who don't know what the governor limits is, governor limits are nothing but the guardrails that Salesforce have provided to make sure that the things are stable in the multi-tenant environment. To make sure the things are working within the limits. So these are not what the Salesforce have done here is they have provided the governor limit. Now let's take one scenario. For example, you have to go and perform the data operations on the millions of record. And you have to do this with the help of the integration. Now, most of the times we always go to the REST API without giving much thought process. So for example, here, if I go with the REST API, what will be the challenges available to me? First one here is with the help of REST API, or before we even go for the decision for the REST API, let's have a quick understanding what is REST API. REST API is something which always works in a synchronous way, and moreover, it will immediately provide the response. Now, the challenges that are available with the REST API is, although it is very fast, it is very much responsive as soon as you are hitting the request, but there are performance bottlenecks that will come into the picture if you are performing the operations with the mass data. And that's where the another tool or another API of the Salesforce that comes into the picture, that is the bulk API. I always give this analogy whenever I compare the REST API as well as the bulk API. REST API is something which is more like your fast car, which can do the operation as soon as possible. Right? You guys can take this diagram or take this image into the analogy. It's very good in case there's a small task that needs to be done. But in case you go and load lots of data with the help of REST API, definitely the performance will be slowed down. On contrast to that, you guys can take this truck as the bulk API, which is very much capable to handle the large amount of data. But again, it will be slow. It will not be as fast as the REST API. So based on the lots of different factors, as a developer or an architect, you have to always do the consider which type of API will work for your requirement. Now, that being said, let's go and try to understand what is the official definition of the bulk API. As I said, the challenge with respect to the large data volume, it can be solved with the help of the bulk API. So what is bulk API? There are few key pointers that you have to understand here. It's a REST-based asynchronous API. So when I say the REST-based means it's not the REST API. REST is nothing but an architectural style that is getting followed. So your bulk API is also based on the REST-based architectural style. Moreover, it is an asynchronous. That means you will not get the immediate response as soon as you are sending the request. It always runs in the background. It is designed to load or delete large data sets efficiently. So what all things that you can do with the help of bulk API, you can perform all the different types of operation like the update, delete, insert, update, upsert. Moreover, you can also perform the export operation also with the help of the bulk API. How the bulk API works, bulk API perform the operations in the background so that you can submit multiple requests at one time, and then you can wait for the results, which can be done as soon as all the request has been processed. Typically, REST API is a good option if you have to process more than 2000 records. Salesforce have a recommendation that rather than you go and use the REST API to process 2000 records, you should definitely leverage the bulk API. And as I said, the supported operations for the bulk API is insert, update, upsert, delete. Moreover, with the help of query, you can also export the records as well with the help of the bulk API. Now, what are the different key characteristics of the bulk API? The first one that we already discussed, it's an asynchronous. Like your REST API, which is synchronous, which will provide the immediate response. Bulk API is something which runs in the background. Once you go and submit your request, basically it will return you the job ID. We'll talk more about this job ID down the line, but with the help of this job ID, you can come back and always check the response. The second thing here is it is RESTful. RESTful means it is based on the REST principle, which will make this particular API more approachable. REST principles like means it's an architectural style. There are few principles based on the architectural style like the statelessness and all. Third one here is the automatic batching. With the bulk API 2.0, and here I am pressing on the word 2.0 because that was not the case whenever the bulk API 1.0 was released. In the case of bulk API 2.0, what you have to do here is you have to simply go and send the large data file to the bulk API. Bulk API is smart enough to break this large data file into the smaller batches. So if you are sending the one big CSV file, Salesforce will automatically handle breaking it down into the appropriate internal batches for the processing. Next one here is, we already discussed this, it is optimized to handle the large data volume. As it is optimized to handle the large data volume, it bypasses the standard API governor limit, which is always a bottleneck or a throttle whenever you are dealing with the REST API call. So the governor limits are on much higher side whenever you use the bulk API. And the last one here is the process to do the bulk API. Trust me, it is very simplified. Although there are multiple steps that needs to be followed, but the steps are very simple to follow whenever you have to go and use the bulk API. Now, we'll try to understand what is bulk API and specifically 2.0. This is what we do use nowadays, but in case you guys are working on any of the legacy project where they have implemented the version 1, you should also know how the version 2.0 is different than the version 1. The first thing here is the simplicity and the batch management. The biggest difference here is in the case of version 1, as an admin or a developer or an architect, you are responsible to send the smaller batches to the bulk API. You are responsible to do the proper chunks of data and send it to the bulk API for the processing. But with the bulk API 2.0, that part has been completely removed. You can send the large big file directly to the bulk API, and the Salesforce will do all the internal batching for you. This is basically dramatically reduce the complexity of the client-side integration logic, where you don't have to go and parse and send the data into the form of smaller batches. Moreover, the error handling part is also quite simplified. In the case of V1, as there are multiple batches are submitted based on the smaller chunks of data that you are passing, you will get the separate success and the failure files for each batch. However, in the case of 2.0, there are all internal batches that Salesforce have created. So what the Salesforce will do, it will go and create one consolidated success file and the one consolidated failure file for you. So there will not be multiple success and the failure file. There will be only one success and the one failure file if you go with the 2.0. There are a few other differences that I have highlighted here. First one here is it is REST with the batch management, where you are responsible to do the batch management. But in the case of 2.0, it is simplified with a single job. Here, multiple batches needs to be submitted for the job. Here, the single batch needs to be submitted for the job, and the API will automatically do all the batching. Complexity wise, it is very much complex to go and configure because you have to handle all the manual batches. As compared to this, 2.0 is considered as the lower complex. Moreover, related to the ease of use part, bulk API will always get a higher number over the bulk API 1.0. Now, again, $1 million mistake. Most of the times, what we do, we don't understand the requirement from the customer. And this is, I'm talking based on my own experience that I have experienced is one of the project in the past where one of the support rep, without much knowledge about the bulk API, started using the REST API to perform the API hits. It was going well till the certain limit, but as soon as the governor limit has been hit, the whole system crashed down. So what happened here is there is a revenue loss for the business because all the API limits has been consumed, governor limits are hit, and there is no way to go back. And that's why it's always that's why you have to always consider using the correct API based on the requirement. I'm not saying bulk API is always the good option. You have to always understand the requirement from the customer, and based on that, you have to make the call whether you should go for the REST API or the bulk API or any other API like the streaming APIs or any other APIs. But you should not be blindly using the REST APIs for all the business requirement. And that's where this diagram will help you to understand how you can make the decision when to go for the REST API and when to go for the bulk API. So whenever the volume of records that you have to deal with, it is in the case, or I can say it's in the range of 200 per call or 2000 within a day, then you should go for the REST API. In the case of the volume of records, it should be 1000 to millions within a day, then you should definitely go for the bulk API. In case you don't want in case you want an immediate response, then definitely you should go for the REST API. But in case you are okay to wait for the response, then definitely asynchronous API is the one that you should go for. One of the major reasons people go and use the bulk API is for the data migration, or you have to perform the mass data updates. But in case based on the UI interactions, you have to make the updates to the data, then definitely REST API is the go-to option. With respect to the governor limit, all the standard API limits will be applicable for the REST API. However, bulk API limits are much on the higher side as compared to the REST API. Complexity wise, it is very much simpler in case you have to deal with the smaller set of record or you have to deal with a single record at a time. But in case the number of records are high, right, then you have to go for the bulk API. Definitely the setup wise, it is bit complex because there are lots of steps that needs to be followed to configure the bulk API. I will talk about those steps also down the line, but complexity wise, REST API is very much simple as compared to the bulk API. Error feedback, it is very much immediate because it is a synchronous one. As soon as you are submitting the request, you will get the response. So definitely it is immediate. But in the case of bulk API, once all the batches have been submitted, then you will get one consolidated file with the success and the failure detail. So to simplify, between the REST API as well as the bulk API. Again, the another analogy here is if you are making an individual phone call for the immediate and the small interactions, then definitely REST API is the go-to option. But in case you have to send the large, you have to go and explain the project, you have to go and read lots of things into the project, right? Then definitely the bulk API is the better option to go for. Again, I'm repeating, both are essential, but when to use what, that's very important. So typical use cases when you should go for the bulk API, as I said, in case you have to go and cleanse the data, for example, you have to go and update the records, or you have to go and delete any existing old records, or perform the archival operations on the bulk number of records, then definitely the bulk API is the go-to option. In case you have to perform the ETL processes, which again involves the high volume of data and the complexity, then definitely you should go for the bulk API. Data migration, this is one of the favorite option where people go for the bulk API from one system to another system. If you have to move the data, where the data is definitely in the millions that you have to move, then you should go for the data migration. And the last one here is the mass data update. Mass data update means in case you have to perform the operations on the bulk number of records. When I say the operation means either insert, update, delete, upsert, or you have to even export the mass number of records, then definitely the bulk API is the option to go for. So what all process that I needs to follow? Like in the past slides, I have repeated this multiple times. While you are using the bulk API, from the setup wise, you have to go through the different stages. So what all different stages that you have to go for? Step number one, you have to go and create the job. Right? For that, you will be sending the request for the job creation. After that, you have to go and upload the data. Once you have uploaded the data, again, you can upload the data at one time, you can upload the data into the multiple batches, it's completely up to you. Once you have closed the job, that means basically you are signaling the bulk API to start processing on that data. Then you can monitor the status of the job. Basically, when you create the job, it will go and return you the job ID. With the help of job ID, what you can do, you can monitor the status of that job. And finally, you can go and retrieve the result to validate whether what all things has been processed or what all things has been failed. We will do this everything in practical in our next video, where we will see how to create the job, upload the job, close the job, monitor, as well as the get result. But again, before we go there, I again want to deep dive into each step, because this is very, very important. You can say this is the foundation of the bulk API. So let's talk about the step number one, that is create job. As I said, after that, you have to upload the data. After that, you have to go and close the job. After that, you have to monitor the job status. And finally, you will be getting the result. So what you have to do in the create job, this is the first step to tell the Salesforce that what type of data that you are, what type of operations that you are performing, on what object that you are performing the operation. Are you inserting or deleting or querying, right? What do you want to do? On what object do you want to do? So you have to also go and specify the object as well as the operation while creating the job. What it will return? It will return one very important thing, that is the job ID, using which you can perform all the remaining operations. Second one here is the upload data. If you are importing the data, your next step is to send the CSV file containing all your Salesforce, all your records to the Salesforce. So basically, what typically in case of bulk API, whenever we have to upload the data, we always send the data in the form of CSV file, which have all the records that needs to be uploaded into the Salesforce. If it's a query job, then you can go and skip that step. Query job means in case you have to export the record, then definitely you can skip that step. But in case you have to perform the operations on the Salesforce record, this is the step that you have to perform. It is also referred as an ingestion step. Third step here is the closing the job. This is most critical stage, because this is the way you are signaling the Salesforce that my upload operation is completed. Now you can start processing those uploaded records. For the query jobs, again, query job means exporting. This step is something which happens automatically. You do not have to do anything. Next thing here is, as I said, bulk API is something which is running in the background. So what you can do, you can monitor the status of the bulk API jobs with the help of the job ID. Again, there can be different status of the jobs. It can be in the progress state, it can be in the completed state, or it can be in the failed state. So this is the place where you can go and check the status of the job, whether it is completed, progress, or failed. Last thing that you have to do here is you can go and get the results of the job. Getting the results of the job means basically what all the different records has been succeeded, what all the different records has been failed. You can go get those results. Moreover, you can also download these results in the CSV file containing your queried data. In case you are making the export request, this is the step with the help of which you can go and download the queried records as well. Now, there are few key terminologies that I want you guys should be aware before we move to our next videos related to the bulk API. Few of the terminologies I might have already discussed and few of them might new. So let's go over this one by one with respect to the bulk API. The first one here is the ingest a job. So what does it mean? Any operation where you are putting the data into the Salesforce, it is referred as the job ingestion in the bulk API. Either you are creating, modifying, or deleting the record, it is referred as the it is referred as the ingestion job. Another term that you can use as an import as well for the ingestion job. Next one here is the query job. Any operation where you are pulling out the data out of the Salesforce, it is referred as the query job. This is same as our export mechanism. Third one here is the job ID. As I said, every time you create a job, what the Salesforce will return you is the job ID. And this job ID as the reference that you have to take whether you are either uploading the data, getting the status of the job, or you are exporting the data. Every time you have to go and use this common job ID. Next thing here is the batching. Batching is something that Salesforce internally handle automatically for the version 2.0. This is one of the major benefits that you do have over the version 1.0. And the last thing here is the job states. Whenever we submit the job, each job went through the different states. We will talk more about these states down the line because each states have their own life cycle. For example, the open, upload complete, in progress, job complete, failed, and the aborted. These are the different phases that typically our job goes through. I hope you folks have found this information helpful with respect to the bulk API. With the help of this particular video, I tried to put the foundational knowledge, which I tried to go as detailed as I can with respect to the bulk API, so that you folks will have the clear understanding what is bulk API version 1, bulk API 2.0, what is the difference between the REST API and the SOAP API, what all the different steps that needs to be done to configure the bulk API job, and also we discussed what all the typical use cases whenever you should go for the bulk API. Do let me know your thoughts in the comment section if you found this particular video helpful. Thank you. Have a good time.